Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm honored to welcome you to the second day of our Energy Forum. I hope you had a fantastic day yesterday, that you had a great evening and come refreshed and excited to this second day of our Energy Forum. Today, we will focus on the role of the consumers, of the citizens, to see what kind of obstacles they're facing when trying to go green, but also what kind of support is given to them, what kind of tools are available, and what is helping them in their wish to go green. Of course, at the same time, we also want to hear from you, your experience, and all that either encourages you or that stops you from jumping on the green train. Today is the day of dialogue between us. Tips and information are an important part of empowering and supporting consumers who can sometimes find themselves in a difficult position for all kinds of reasons. Consumers shall engage actively in the green transition and shall have the right means at hand. The drivers that consumers should be is very important. Our perspective is that consumers should not, let's say, just undergo, should not suffer from the energy transition. They should not be victims. To the contrary, they should be drivers. Consumers overall are very interested in taking an active role, and that's precisely what we want to support. Of course, there is an impact of the energy transition on the consumers in the day-to-day life, and that is something we have to care for, we have to build in, but we clearly see the consumers as very active drivers in this transition. As the results of various consumer surveys that we have done show, it is clear that consumers are interested to make necessary changes. They want to be active. But of course, sometimes they're facing challenges on their way to greener consumption. These challenges can be of economic, informational, or also social nature. The studies show that there is still non-realized potential to increase the share of consumers who make more sustainable choices. This is particularly true for vulnerable consumers. It is clear that action should also mean change, but we must do all we can to ensure that this change is not unfair and that it will be just for all the consumers. Nobody should be left behind. Today, we will hear more about the factors that hinder consumers to go for green consumption and a green energy footprint. Sometimes consumers can face difficulties involuntarily or temporarily, as we will hear in the story of the fictitious Mr. Carl Green later today. For consumers to show their true power as enablers of the green transition, they need support, they need to be equipped, they need to be supported in European, national and local actions. We will hear more about this support in the coming sessions. Today, we will have 3 sessions. First, a session that will reflect the consumer perspective and the problems that consumers might face when they want to go for more sustainable choices. The panelists will present projects that can help consumers in their journey. We know that the lack of reliable information at the point of sale about the environmental sustainability prevents consumers from translating their desire to opt for sustainable choices into green purchasing decisions. It must also be borne in mind that both the private and public sectors, alongside civil society organizations, of course, have a responsibility and an opportunity to give consumers tools at their hands. In the second session, then, we will hear an inspiring story of 2 Dutch citizens who wanted to decarbonize their lifestyle. They will tell us about their journey, their motivation, the challenges they were facing, and how they overcame these challenges. We will also hear about the European Green Capital 2021, the Finnish city of Lahti, that helped consumers move towards a sustainable lifestyle. We will hear more about what consumer organizations are doing to also assist consumers. Actions such as organizing a joint auction for solar panels or consumer counseling how to decarbonize the personal lifestyle. The third and final session then will feature best practices in terms of innovative products and services provided by energy retail suppliers in order to inform consumers about the most affordable offers. We will hear more about the price comparison tools, visual platforms that facilitate collective switching, and fixed price offers. Colleagues, we want this to be our common dialogue, and we want this forum to be as interactive as possible. To that end, I encourage you to participate in many ways and ask questions. We will put a couple of Slido questions to you, which you already used yesterday, so please keep your mobile phone with the Slido app at your hand. But also, if you have any comments, any questions, really please feel encouraged to put your questions in the chat, and then we will try to respond to that. So now let us all have a fruitful discussion today. I'm very much looking forward to hearing from the speakers and the audience how to put consumers at the very center of the green transition. With this, I would now like to give the floor to Commissioner Reinders, the Commissioner for Justice and Consumer Protection, to open this second day of the forum with a pre-recorded video message.
Good morning. I'm pleased to be here with you to launch the second day of the Citizens Energy Forum. Today, you are going to reflect about how to involve consumers in the green transition, and I believe this discussion is key. Indeed, it is now clear that the majority of consumers want to contribute to the green transition. They want to consume more sustainably, buy more sustainably, and live more sustainably. But there are barriers to this. Today, you will look later at the question of what makes it so difficult to get started and to become a green and active consumer. The first obstacle is that sustainable options are not always accessible to every citizen. Take smart meters, for example. They can help reduce energy consumption. That much is proven. But consumers often need a lot of help to understand information and how they can act on it. Not to speak about consumers with disabilities, who are even more disadvantaged as few smart meters are adapted for them. Recently, the European Union has witnessed a massive rise in energy prices. This is a serious concern for everyone. High energy prices lead to energy poverty, which leads to social exclusion. In turn, higher energy prices may affect consumers' ability to choose more sustainable options for their energy sources, the energy efficiency of their buildings, or their energy consumption. This is why an important objective of the green transition and the Green Deal is that the transition must be fair for the consumer. No one should be left behind. Another concern from our own consultations with consumers is that the vast majority of people are unsatisfied with the environmental information that is given to them. But what is even more problematic is that today, the information that can be found on the market about the green credentials of a product is not always reliable. A recent Commission study on environmental claims found that 80% of web shops, web pages, and advertisements surveyed contain green claims. This sounds good, but we also found that more than half of these claims were vague, misleading, or simply unfounded. To successfully decarbonize your lifestyle, you need to have access to the facts. This is what we in the European Commission want to address. Another angle we want to tackle is wastefulness. If we want a sustainable future, products should be built to last or with a possibility to be repaired. Again, from our own research, we can see that over 90% of consumers want to have information about the lifespan of goods, but this information is rarely available. Moreover, some products are even designed to fail, leaving us with no other option than to buy new ones. Indeed, we learned through an EU-funded project that some goods tend to fail right after the end of the minimum legal guarantee period. We want to put an end to these practices. To briefly conclude, in the Commission, we are convinced that consumers need to be empowered to participate in the green transition. If we want consumers to be able to make sustainable choices, we need to ensure they are provided with the right tools and information. Today, you will be answering some of the most relevant questions facing consumers ahead of the green transition. And I truly look forward to hearing your discussions. Thank you for your consistent engagement in keeping consumer policy high on the agenda, and best of luck for the 2021 Citizens Energy Forum.
After having listened to the video message of the Commissioner, let's now move to session 1, which is titled, "What Makes It So Difficult for Me to Get Started?" As I mentioned already, we know, and I'm sure that you all can confirm that there is a lot of interest of the consumers to go green, to change the personal way how we are consuming, how we are using the energy in our day-to-day life. However, very often we are facing problems, obstacles. And before we are going to the panel that will provide a different perspective on this kind of hurdles that we are facing in our day-to-day work, we would like to start with you and get a feedback from your side. So please get your Slido app out, because we would like to know from you whether you already have encountered difficulties in your life when trying to act for a green transition. You probably all had already situations where you tried to go green. So now we are very interested to have your feedback. Therefore, I suggest that we launch the Slido question and that you get your app and then give us your answer. So which difficulties have you encountered in your life when trying to act for green transition? Was it the cost of change? Was it lack of information, lack of time? Was it just not up to you to do this change? Or was there anything else? Or have you never ever experienced any difficulties at all? So let's see. Thanks a lot. First answers are coming in. Let's watch a bit how this is developing. I hope you can all see the answers emerging. Let's give it another few seconds that we get some more answers from your side. The lack of information is catching up after the cost of change. All right, colleagues, thanks a lot for your answers. You still can provide your answers. I think the Slido is still open for a while, but I think it already gives a good impression of the experiences that you as participants had. So the most important obstacle that many of you were facing is the cost of change, a very important element that the Commissioner also raised already in his introduction. And of course, with the rising energy prices we are facing at the moment, this aspect probably becomes even more important. Although, as you will see, we will try to make the case that by taking an active role as consumer, the costs should not be a hurdle, but rather an opportunity. But also some other elements were mentioned as very important obstacles, such as the lack of the right information. Thanks a lot for that. That, let's say, is a very interesting picture of your personal experiences. Now, allow me to introduce the panel that will share thoughts and experiences from their perspective. First, we have Isabelle Busca, the head of the EU Liaison Office in Brussels of the Federation of German Consumer Organizations, the VZBV. She has long-standing experience in Brussels and on consumer matters, and the VZBV is one of the strongest actors also in this energy transition. Then we have Mr. Hendrik Bruns, who works as policy analyst at the Competence Center for Behavioral Insights of the Commission's Joint Research Center. He focuses on work related to climate, energy, and the environment. Specifically, he works on ways to make it easier for people to behave in an environmentally friendly way and explore strategies to help people spot and counter disinformation. And then we have Ingrida Murauskaite-Bull. She's a project officer also at the Commission's Joint Research Center, and she works on different energy-related issues, especially energy behavior, energy and transport poverty, social innovation, energy, and other social aspects of energy transition. I'm delighted to have a great panel for this first session. Thanks a lot for joining. So let us start with Isabelle, who will tell us a fascinating story about a fictitious person, Carl Green. But without further ado, Isabelle, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Niels, for your kind introduction. And indeed, let me tell you and illustrate to you what the challenges of going green are for consumers. Let me tell you about Carl Green. So Carl is an average consumer, but he tries to be eco-conscious with all the consumption decisions that he makes. Carl was very excited this morning. He saw his dream house advertised on his real estate app. Unfortunately, he was so excited that he dropped his smartphone in his coffee mug. And that was the beginning of a rather unexpected day. First of all, he of course wanted to call the real estate agent to secure a visiting slot for his dream house. But that turned out to be difficult as his smartphone had not survived its unexpected swimming lesson in Carl's coffee mug. Okay, let's switch on the laptop to send an email. Done. Fantastic. Phew. Carl starts to sweat. So much excitement in the morning. Let's turn down the heating a bit. But hang on. The app to regulate his smart thermostats and the heating is on his smartphone, and that is in the coffee mug. While Carl's laptop is still on the table, he takes another look at his dream house. Aha, typical Brussels townhouse with one back and one front facade. Needs full renovation. Oh, but hey, that gives you the opportunity to modernize also the energy efficiency. Carl dreams of installing a groundwater heat pump. They're so efficient in countries like Germany, and he has read tons of articles about it. But he realizes, how do these enormous machines come and drill down in your garden when it is not accessible from the street? He's heard of air source heat pumps that just sit at the back facade. Maybe that would be an option to explore. And then he remembers that heat pumps are best combined with PV solar panels. And he wonders, do these installations require a building permit? He browses online, and before he finds an answer to his question, he comes across the forms to apply for subsidies to install solar PV. Great, let's download the form. The very same websites, however, also mentions that the potential need to change one's electricity supply contract, as you will need to account for the self-consumption and the feeding back into the grid of your photovoltaic. Phew, those are a lot of things to take care of just to make your heating system more ecological. What was recommended again? Fixed price or variable contract? And if fixed price, for how long should he bind himself to an energy provider? Or when does the energy provider invest in renewable capacity or only purchase green certificates? Carl would like to see investment in renewable energy generation. But maybe the place where the house is located has access to district heating. Carl needs to investigate that. Carl decides to take a break from all these complicated questions and remembers that it was his turn this week to do the grocery shopping. That is a welcome distraction from thinking about energy-efficient technologies. To make sure he has the shopping list with him, Carl starts looking for his smartphone. Ah, screw it, in the coffee mug. Okay, a handwritten shopping list it is then. Once that is done, Carl leaves for the closest supermarket. His wife and him are expecting guests for dinner, so he will have to buy some food items that he usually doesn't buy. Even though he could go there by public transport, Carl takes his brand new electric car to go to the supermarket. The car was more expensive than Carl had hoped, but he's convinced that electric is the future. And the street behind the supermarket has charging points for electric vehicles for which Carl has a subscription. So he parks the car at the charging point, happy to take advantage of the low charging price through his subscription. Only then does he realize that to use his subscription, he needs to pay with a related mobile app. And he remembers that he dropped his phone in the coffee. But since he needs some charging, he decides to still get some charge and pay with his debit card. So he gets out and looks for the card terminal, just to realize that the charging point does not offer card payment. Sincerely annoyed, Carl parks his car on the supermarket parking instead and enters the supermarket. First, he needs to buy some wine for the guests. Ah, but hang on, what is actually more sustainable? Biodynamic wine from Spain or organic wine from France? And what is actually the difference? Both wines actually display a QR code that promises further sustainability information. Too bad, though, that his phone is out of order. He wished that all that information would be available on the product label directly. His wife and him could not decide what to have for aperitif, dried ham or guacamole made of avocados. They decided to take the decision based on what is more sustainable. The ham Carl finds in the supermarket is from France and labeled as CO2 neutral, but wrapped in plastic. And the guacamole stars avocados from Mexico, but comes in a pot made of recycled cardboard. How on earth should he know what is more sustainable? In the end, Carl decides to leave both options aside and go for regular crisps. After all, they're cheaper and he still has to pay his loan for the new electric car. Yes, he can see the Nutri-Score on the packaging reminding him that it is not the most healthy option he's going for. But Carl is tired of making decisions today. And just thinking of the fact that he will have to choose and purchase a new smartphone, ideally one that does not have too much impact on the environment, makes him roll his eyes. Why does it have to be so complicated to be a green consumer?
Thanks a lot, Isabelle. Fascinating story. I feel tired indeed just by listening to the story you're telling, but it's exciting to see. Let's say Carl is, let's say, a leading example. He is committed to improve his energy footprint in terms of housing, in terms of mobility, in terms of food. And we know those are 3 out of the 4 areas where our personal consumption matters enormously for the footprint. The only part, let's say, he did not cover, the 4th part is the leisure, the free time. So I was expecting that he is trying to go on a trip to I don't know where and reflecting whether he goes for a green trip or whether he goes for a normal trip. But no, thanks a lot for this immensely rich story, which shows in the different areas, let's say, what an interest can be, but indeed also what kind of problems they're coming up. Perhaps we will come back to that, let's say, in a moment. Let's first give the floor to Hendrik, who, let's say, with his behavior science background, also wants to come in and share some, let's say, observations in, let's say, this situation where consumers want to go green, but are then facing problems. Hendrik, over to you.
Thank you very much, Niels, and thank you very much, Isabelle. And yeah, I will pick up on this story by Isabelle because I also like it very much. And some of the things really like I want to pick up on. And I remember that Isabelle said that, like by quoting Carl Green, who might as well be Carla Green, for example, how on earth should we know what is more sustainable, and that Carl is tired of making decisions today. And that's indeed interesting because, I mean, we are so used to making decisions on the side, to make them every day, that decision making can also very often and frequently be very, very difficult for different reasons. And I would like to focus a bit more not on the things that from within, but also on on the way that we face decisions, on the context in which we have to make decisions, on the role that this context can play in order for us to make decisions, and especially, of course, for Carl Green to make a decision for his most preferred ecological heating system, whether it be PV solar, heat pump, etc. So Isabelle already highlighted that it can be very, very difficult to make such a decision. There are a lot of different components, and if you let's simplify it a bit to think about that Carl Green goes on an internet website where he sees all the different heating installations, for example, all the different heat pumps, and he has to choose one because he can only install one. And these different heat pumps, they might differ by so many different characteristics. They might have used different technologies. They use different. They are constructed from different materials. Possibly, they require different investments. They differ also with respect to their running costs. They might be differing with respect to how sustainable they are, and many, many different more, not least the price, of course. And we saw on the Slido task that price is a very, very important characteristic of whether we decide to go green or not. So this is also very, very important context. And let's not forget that with respect to price as well, Carl just faced a very important loss, namely that he lost his phone and he has to buy a new one, possibly. So all of these things can actually affect the decision that he's making. If you think about the website, the price of a specific heat pump might be especially salient, so it might be very, very visually noticeable. This might affect his choice. He might also be put off by comparing all the different aspects of a heat pump and just focus on a subset of these different characteristics and just compare these. This is, for example, in the behavioral sciences referred to as a local construal, that you compare alternatives by a subset and not by all different characteristics of these heat pumps, for example. He might also, and we all know that, simply be overwhelmed by all the different number of options, by all the different possibilities. This is usually referred to as choice overload, and we all have faced situations in which we felt overwhelmed by all the different possibilities of choosing. There is also something that we might be overwhelmed by cognitive load, so that Carl is not just making the decision of the heat pump, but he also, in the back of his mind, it's looming that he has to buy a new phone, that this impacts his wealth, the money that he has, and this might indeed change his decision in the end, because he's distracted. In the back of his head, there is this looming problem of a financial loss that he has to offset somehow, and this might in fact even keep him or distract him from doing a decision in the end. So he has the intention of making a sustainable goods decision, but thinking about this loss of his phone might actually keep him from following up on his intentions and keep him from making a decision in the end. Also, if you think about the website, maybe some specific brands of heating pumps are shown at the top of the list, might not necessarily be the best ones, right? We all know that maybe the top list options might not necessarily be the best one, but we need to scroll down, we need to click through different pages in order to see all different options. And then last but not least, you might also think, well, what do my neighbors think? What do my friends think? What type of heating installation do they have? What do they think I should have? Is that important to me? So also the social norms, the descriptive social norms, or what I think my peers or my significant others value might also impact how I choose. Usually what policymakers do is to provide people with information, with all the information that people need to make an informed decision. But if Carl Green is overwhelmed by this decision, this information might not be enough, and then policymakers, for example, should look for other alternatives to make such a decision as easy as possible, so that even people like Carl Green, who suffer from the recent loss of their mobile phone, might make still a conscious, very well informed, and also sustainable decision. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Hendrik. Indeed, you refer to the choice overload and put further emphasis on the complexity of the decisions. And you're right, even issues like let's say, the reflection on what others think about your behavior. That also matters for let's say in terms of mobility, but even in terms of let's say other consumptive choices that you're doing. And you went into quite some let's say interesting details on the heat pumps. Let's say how complex it can only be to choose the right heat pump. And in the example of Isabelle, the choice was even more complicated, because what kind of energy solution do I go for? Do I go for the kind of groundwater pump, but perhaps that's not possible, or let's say an air-to-air heat pump, or perhaps district heating, so even more complex. Before coming back to those aspects, perhaps Ingrida, briefly over to you. Let's say from your perspective and your background, I understand you also want to come in a bit on the example of Carl or Carla Green. How do you see this situation, the challenges that consumers like Carl are facing?
Yes, thank you very much, Nils, and colleagues as well. I'll try to build up a little bit on your stories, also on what Hendrik has mentioned as well. I will try to focus actually on 2 points. So the level of preparedness for the green transition, and also the role of different policies in our daily lives in particular, and building exactly on all the story that we heard just now about the Carl Green. So consumers have different levels of preparedness for the green transition, meaning they have different awareness levels of the potential impacts of the major trends. They have different perceptions towards these impacts, and also different levels of willingness, right, to adapt to those expected changes. Carl Green already demonstrates, I would say, very high level of preparedness by owning, an electric vehicle and looking for ways to make his home more energy efficient, and also trying to buy only sustainable products, right? Not all of us do that still. So Carl is really setting a bar high, right, for all of us. The awareness, perception, and willingness to adapt to change of individual users, it varies greatly, and it is also influenced by socioeconomic factors such as education, age, and income of the individual as well. For instance, based on the Eurobarometer survey, we see that younger respondents are more likely to be ready to switch to more sustainable forms of transport. Right. Apart from socioeconomic factors, we all know that the pandemic significantly contributes to changing users' needs, especially evident, I would say, on less public transport usage. So there are really multiple different aspects that come into play. Overall, we seem to be witnessing an increasing trend, I would say, of responsible choices from those who aim to live a more sustainable life. In our latest JRC report on the future of jobs, we also discuss the likely trends between now and 2040 that include more sharing, lending, repairing, instead of just buying new products. Which was also mentioned, Nils, by you and the commissioner in his message as well. Also, we discussed the development of technologies to enable the sustainable consumption. Just to take an example, sensors to track carbon footprints. I think that we indeed live in an increasingly interconnected digital world, and being a consumer for sure is not always easy. We see that Carl Green only temporarily lost access to his smartphone, and he is now therefore confronted with this whole list of limitations. Right. However, many citizens in Europe still either lack the digital access or do not have the digital skills that are needed for, I would say, the twin green and digital transitions. Therefore, the EU also develops a number of initiatives, like the European Skills Agenda, which is a 5-year plan that aims to help solve this issue and provide also a framework for skills development in what we can, in a way, describe as just a changing world. I really feel for our character, Carl Green, when he has to make a choice between a more sustainable product and the one that's packaged in less plastic. Through the use directive on single-use plastics, different measures are being applied to different products. This does not cover all the product categories, but it surely is a big step in the right direction to limit the single-use plastics. Also, to make the consumer's choice easier, we have witnessed a recent development on energy labels, followed by labels for light bulbs and lamps. This then helps consumers to cut their energy bills and also their carbon footprint as well. Carl then talks about renovating his home, but energy efficient building renovations can be expensive, as we know, and owners may not always have the means to finance them. Here, national support mechanisms as well as the EU funding programs play a huge role, especially for the vulnerable parts of society who cannot afford making their homes more sustainable, or even worse, are confronted with energy poverty. The Renovation Wave initiative under the European Green Deal, for instance, has a strong financing component that then aims to ensure that the needed investments are enabled at the necessary scale. I think what I'm trying to say using all of these examples is that whilst it is important for governments to reassure that the support is available, the consumers are not being left alone, right? In the end of the day, each consumer is the biggest partner in the green transition. And I would like to conclude with a suggestion to Carl Green and also any other citizen who found themselves in his story to continue being an active member in the green transition, become co-owners of renewables installations by joining energy communities, for instance, and also join action for combating climate change alongside your municipalities and your local communities. Thanks a lot. Back to you, Nils.
Thanks a lot, Ingrida. Well, yes, you're probably right that Carl or Carla starts off already at a very high level in terms of awareness, in terms of interest to go green, but also in terms of financial means to buy his dream house, to own an electric car. You make his choices and his life even more complicated by bringing in the idea of sharing society. So rather than owning the electric car, perhaps go for a car sharing rather than having the own car. And even now your last suggestion to join a community of energy co-owners, which is yet another decision that he would have to take. So it shows that indeed for consumers in this effort to go green, there is a huge amount of decisions to be taken based on all kinds of information sources that are needed. Colleagues, now over to you as participants before we will further discuss also here in the panel. Now, if you have any questions and comments, any observations on the topic of this first session, namely where consumers are interested to go green but are facing problems, please feel free to ask any questions, make any comments in the chat function, and then we will try to pick it up. You now have time. We still have around 10 minutes here in this panel, so please feel free to share your ideas in the chat function, and then we'll pick it up. But in the meantime, colleagues, Isabelle, I would like to come back to you. We have heard about this interest of Carl, how he was struggling. But now listening to let's say, what you were saying, but also Henrik and Ingrida, are we perhaps expecting too much of the consumer? Is this ideal of the empowered consumer pushing it a bit too far? Shouldn't we sometimes go, like Ingrida mentioned, the example of the single-use plastics? Wouldn't it be easier for the consumer sometimes to just impose a certain solution, because then the consumer doesn't have to choose herself or himself anymore? Let's say, is this entire work stream in the energy transition sometimes pushing the consumers too far? What do you think? What is your experience?
In a way, I think I strongly disagree with the framing, but it's really important. I think all our debate has shown this, that you need preconditions, you need a framework to be actually an empowered consumer. You cannot do it without any precondition. You need a certain type of information. You need some practices to not be allowed so that they cannot mislead you and lead you onto the wrong track. For instance, as the commissioner said earlier, to claim something about environmental characteristics, which is not there. So it is really about the framework. I think also Ingrida gave another important example that is often underestimated in its powerfulness, is eco-design. She mentioned the light bulbs and the energy label, but the double approach of phasing out products that don't meet certain efficiency standards, and in the future hopefully also that don't match efficiency standards in terms of resources, that is certainly a good practice, a best practice that has proven its worthiness in Europe. And then you combine it with not a lot of text information, but with graphics that have proven through the past and to a lot of research that they can be understood by consumers, that make individual choices easier because items become comparable. And I think Henrik also rightly mentioned the problem of how do I compare across different technologies, and then there maybe the heat pumps are ranked differently on websites, not necessarily according to the best efficiency, and so on and so forth. So it is not so much about imposing certain things onto consumers, but is actually about enabling an enabling framework to then have the possibility in the first place to take these decisions in a right way. Otherwise, we can get nowhere. So it's more about the collective effort and not putting all the burden on the individual consumer, because this is not going to deliver.
Let me share with them, and perhaps also Isabelle, you want to start first, and then Hendrik and Ingrida, feel free to come in. One point which clearly comes out of the comments is the question of let's say, affordability and the personal situation in which the consumers are. The example of Karl is certainly one which is at the upper end of the scale. So buying a house, owning an electric car. Today, many consumers are facing problems just to pay the daily bills. They're living in a rented accommodation where the owner doesn't have the interest to do the renovation because it costs him or her just money, and the energy bill anyway is paid by the tenant. So what kind of let's say, support can we give in this? We come to the question of support also in sessions 2 and 3, but nonetheless, let's reflect a bit about this situation of the consumer in, let's say, quite a different situation. And then, let's say, one question and comment was also about the motives for consumers to become green, and the question whether it wouldn't be good to integrate the environmental impact more into the calculation of the prices, because we know that prices are driving the choice of consumers very strongly, sometimes out of necessity. But even if you have a certain choice to go for a slightly more expensive product, the price will still be predominant. And we know that lots of environmental impacts are not reflected in the price. So there are two important aspects coming out of the questions. Isabelle, do you want to come in? And then perhaps Hendrik and Rita also?
Happily, and that puts the finger where it hurts. So, for instance, in Germany, around 50% of consumers are tenants. They don't own the place that they live in, and you have that owner-tenant problem indeed about the investment. This is why it's so important that we have a proper framework, for the sort of tenant possibilities to invest in solar panels, so they can act individually as a community of tenants to invest in more renewable electricity, for instance. It is also a reason why we are pushing really hard that energy efficiency measures are predominantly and sort of as a priority being rolled out with more vulnerable consumers, because otherwise it will not happen with where they live, because they don't have the means to invest. We should not be naive. The energy transition is going to cost a lot of money, and consumers alone cannot cough it up. It is a collective effort, so we also need the collective money, basically the tax revenue, to make those investments. So we will need a lot of public money to invest rightly. We also need to share the burden. we have CO2 pricing, and that joins a little bit the question of the internalization of costs. The second question, you need to distribute it fairly between owners and tenants, which is not the case at the moment. But the internalization of those environmental costs, we need to be careful about that. Generally speaking, we should try to implement that. However, in some sectors, it will not be possible without any flanking measures. We cannot just increase the price of mobility for people that need it without offering any alternatives. So if we look into more rural areas, we cannot just basically drive up the prices of fuel without flanking it with better train connections, other public services, or more flexible sharing offers and these kind of things. So really need to think about packages and have an overall view of this. Just working with the price is not going to deliver.
Thanks a lot, Isabelle. Hendrik, Ingrida, do you want to come in on this?
I would like to come in a little bit and build on what Isabella just explained to us as well. I think that ensuring the fairness of the green transition is surely one of the key, if not the most key element we can find. And firstly, we have to avoid producing further inequalities, I would say. Social impacts, they really do vary, by country, sector, region, and reskilling and income support and ensuring the appropriate access to basic needs such as energy and transport are just simply crucial. In the context also of the declining industries, we have workers losing their jobs, especially in the coal industry. We need to have the means for them to participate in upskilling, reskilling programs as well, so that they do have the right access, same digital access even, and be skilled to pursue their jobs in the green transition. Also, in some regions, these vulnerable people can be burdened not only by one, but by multiple challenges. I mentioned a little bit the issue about unemployment, but also energy poverty. So the financial mechanisms and policy instruments that we have launched under the Green Deal, including the Just Transition Fund, the Renovation Wave, Digital Access Plan, all of these are going to be simply crucial in supporting those regions in transition, especially the ones from coal-related industrial activity, I would say.
Thanks a lot, Ingrida. Hendrik, anything from your side?
Yeah, maybe a bit more from the scientific perspective, but still interesting, since we are talking a lot about the restraints that are posed by liquidity, so by money, and that this transition is for many people a huge burden financially. And there's actually very interesting research that the problem is not just the restraint or the restriction in financial resources, but actually having to worry about money, having this constantly in the back of your head, actually has imposes a cognitive tax on your thinking, on your ability to make informed decisions. So it's actually, you could compare that to a temporary decrease in your IQ, just because you have to worry about money, about making ends meet, while you would like to do a decision that has nothing to do directly with this problem that caused the lack of resources, or the lack of money in this case. And this is actually something that policymakers should take into account, that it's not just about the restraints, the lack of money, but also that this having to focus on money, having to make ends meet, might actually make it more difficult for you to make a decision in the first place, or a decision that is important for to make the green transition.
Thanks a lot, Hendrik. And participants, you continue also putting very interesting comments into the Slido chat. Thanks a lot for those. Just as we are approaching the end of this first session, just to mention a few important elements coming out. One regarding the situation of emissions at home. Let's say a couple of colleagues point to the one problem is that, let's say, the issue that we already had referred to, that where you have a tenant, but the landlord doesn't have this interest to renovate, that probably requires incentives from a regulatory point of view, because the tenant will not have any power towards the landlord to do something. So unless there is a clear framework, this will simply not work out. And also in terms of the framework, some are asking whether, let's say, we are not too much focusing on the privatization of going green, whether we don't also need some let's say, strong legal framework in different contexts, an aspect we started referring to before, but I think it's a very valid question. Let's say, how far do you, let's say, impose certain choices in this necessity to go green, and where do you leave the choice to consumers themselves? And then lots of comments concern still the financial burden of consumers in this energy transition. One question in particular is whether, considering the financial situation and the developments we see on energy prices, whether we expect that more consumers will be in a situation of vulnerability. I think, let's say, we can conclude the first session here by realizing that indeed the costs are a major aspect in the let's say, effort to go green. That becomes even more important and is something which clearly requires for support. A couple of comments also ask, what can the EU do? What can others do? That leads to the next session, so I will not go into the answers, but clearly the costs are a major driver. The information overload and the complexity of information is very significant. Again, calls for solutions, questions of whom do you trust. Isabelle, you said, let's say, we need a framework in which those decisions are taken. So the information complexity is critical, the trustworthiness, the understandability of information, the availability, online, offline. Again, something we need to talk about when we are reflecting on the solutions in the next session. But then also really this question about the choice, so where the consumers decide themselves, and the question where we need binding legislation to, let's say, take at political level certain decisions which then apply to all, and also in situations where a consumer who wants to change does simply not have the means to push for this change. And then really perhaps the most important point is really this desire, this call to leave no one behind in this energy transition, to make sure that indeed everybody can benefit from the energy transition. Again, a strong call for action, and clearly a point to which we have to come back in the next session. So with this, let me conclude this first session. Thanks a lot to the panelists for your great input. Thanks to the participants for your comments and ideas. Now we will have a technical break of 5 minutes, and then we are back, I would say, at 11 o'clock. Thanks a lot to all, and see you in 5 minutes. Welcome back, everybody, to our second session of today. I hope you're as excited as I am after we discussed all the challenges in the first session, now to look into the solutions that are there to support consumers in the green transitions. Again, like in the last session, we would like to start this session with a question to you. And the question is whether you have tried yourself to reduce your emissions already. So please open again your Slido app and let us know whether you tried already yourself to reduce your emissions. Thanks a lot. Okay, answers are still coming in. But for the time being, clear majority for yes, I have tried with success. But also an important part answers no, too expensive to reduce the emissions, and becoming even more outspoken. A few, yes, but without success, and some no, don't have the information. Okay, colleagues, thanks a lot for that feedback. So happy to see that many have tried it with success, but also let's say those that responded that they did not try because of the cost reflects clearly the discussions we had at the last session. This session again is meant to explain what kind of support is there to help consumers in their efforts to go green. Let me welcome another great panel for this part of today's discussion. We have first Martin Alders and his partner Lenny Kanters. They live in Middelburg in the beautiful province of Zeeland in the Netherlands. Martin is 83 years old, worked as a community worker for more than 50 years in Rotterdam, but also abroad. His partner Lenny Kanters was all the time with him there and supported him in every possible way. They're both still active in the energy transition, and we are very excited to hear their story. Then we have Elina Oyala. She is the environmental director of the city of Lahti, the European Green Capital 2021. Lahti is very interesting. It has an ambitious climate neutrality target for the year 2025, 10 years ahead of Finland's national target. And Elina's team is coordinating the measures to meet the climate neutrality target and is also in charge of preparing and coordinating the city's environmental policy as a whole. So very interested to hear how he's supporting the consumers in Lahti. Then we have Els Bruggeman, who is the EU Public Affairs Advisor for the Belgian consumer organization Testdascher Test and Coop. She joined the consumer movement in 2014 and is a member of the executive board of the European umbrella organization BEOC, but also of the steering committee of the Transatlantic Consumer Dialogue, so bringing in the national, the European, and even the transatlantic agenda. And then we have again Isabelle Busca, whom I warmly welcome again to the second panel. So Isabelle, you're also my anchor woman to take, let's say, the complexities of session 1 into this session 2. With this, I would like to first pass the floor then to Martin and Lenny to tell us about your story, what you did, and what kind of support you also used in your efforts to go green.
Okay, thank you. My hometown is Middelburg in the province Zeeland in the Netherlands. I'm living in an apartment from 100 square meters. It's built in 1990 with energy label C. Please give me the sheet shift. Yes, you see now the place where I live on the 4th floor. I started my personal energy transition with a CO2 reduction, with a very strong motivation after 10 years of Bosnia-Herzegovina and Afghanistan under the umbrella of the United Nations. So after that 10 years, my lung capacity was down till 40% through a very bad air quality there in the cities of Tuzla, Kabul, Jalalabad. How to carbonize my lifestyle? After an extensive analysis, please, the second sheet. You see here what I'm looking, where I can the best thing to do with every part of your need you need energy. Cooking, hot water, for example, the shower is very important because it's 22% hot water. And what I do is not every day a shower, low temperature and not so long, few minutes. So that sort of small things, we analyzed it and we started 10 years ago. And the totally reduced of CO2 was on that amount 25%. My starting points was CO2 reduction by full electric. I want to go full electric. Energy neutral with sun and wind. Long-term vision for the minimum 15 years. Commitment to invest the finance reserves we have in the 10 years into wind turbines and solar energy, PV cells. I started with as an owner association. I was a chairman on that moment. with 88 solar cells on the roof of our buildings, renovation of 2 elevators, a new booster pump for the high level water, 120 new public lights, and 8 new electric doors, and all very nice water softening supply throughout the building, calcium free. So the total energy reduction in the buildings for 50 households was 50%. Energy neutral with 22,500 kilowatt hour per year through the 88 solar cells. Investment of the association was 30,000 euro. Payback period of 7 years due the tax breaks, salderen in the Netherlands. Profit for 25 years. And I am now ambassador for all the owner associations in the Netherlands. Okay, now I go to my own apartment. Please, the next. Yes, thank you. I started in 2011 to become a member of Zeewind. There's a citizen organization with more than 60 windmills. Early investments in Zeewind directly in the wind turbines and solar cells. Choice for full electric, cooking, domestic hot water and heating system. A new fuse box with a power current and a maximum output of 3 times 25 ampere. You must have strong power for the electric. A new electric stove with induction and electric heating and a boiler combination. Okay. How to finance that? Please, the next sheet. Yes. You see what the cost is. It's not so expensive, electric stove and heating. I do that step by step in 10 years. The last, and shows what we do with our extra money in that 10 years. I'm a normal salary. I'm a pensioner with the Dutch money and my own pension together, but it's a normal middle class salary. And we chose the last 10 years, the last 2 years, our holiday money because it's Corona, tax return money we have, sold my petrol car because I have an electric car in not to buy, but in a private lease. And no saving on the bank. All the investments are on sun and wind. I know that 25% can pay this, cannot pay this. 50% must make choices, and 25% it's only do it. It's no problem. Then we have our own situation. No planes, drive an electric car, what I say. Trains and e-bikes. Flexitarian and vegan foods. Rent a kitchen garden plot and the new electric householding. No gas and no petrol. Then my frame, it's important. When I talk about it, it's for a high rising building with an individual energy label A, B, and C. That's the old label, not the new one. Okay, for individual energy, you cannot put solar cells on a collective roof. It's not allowed to do that. When the people start in the building with full electric, you must install stronger power cables. That's only what you do, more power from the network operator. And he is responsible for that. Now my plus points. It's more safer than gas and give good feeling for everybody. No raw gas exhaust ducts, so pipes. No extra cruising work, no maintenance on the electric heating, and no gas component in the bill of the energy supplier. Well, thank you very much for the attention, and I'm very open for discussion because there is also a last page. Oh, you see what my suggestion for subsidizing on my calculation is uh, everybody give 1600 euro, and then you are completely financed with 10,000 of yourself. It's not so expensive. My idea was when I live in a low house on the street, then I must invest for that 2 times more or 3 times more. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Martin, for this very inspiring story, and thanks for sharing it with us. What I found particularly interesting is that you have different elements how you address the energy transition. There are you started with very small changes in your flat, like more energy efficient lamps. You mentioned your frying pan, so very small
Yeah,
things that probably everybody can do. And if I understood you correctly, already with those small changes, you achieved a reduction of CO2 by 25%, which I guess
yeah.
for you also translated into, let's say, cost savings. And there are perhaps 2 or 3 questions to you first. Let's say for this first phase where you did the small things in your flat, you said you achieved 25% CO2 reduction. Did you also make a calculation of the costs and the cost savings? So whether you made overall a net benefit in terms of cost? That's the first question. The second question, you mentioned that you were then the chair of this co-owner community. And we had precisely this question in the session before, that where you are living in a flat and you have other co-owners, being in a co-owner community may hinder you from moving forward in terms of the energy efficiency of your flat. Did you have any problems with the other co-owners? And the last question I would like to have is whether you used, at least in this first phase, any public subvention, any support for those kind of steps.
Yeah, first, I've in the beginning they say to me, but I'm 5 years full electric on this moment without gas. The first thing what they say to me, you are crazy, total crazy. You are. It's too expensive. We cannot do that. But I say, not my start point was the money. My start point was CO2 reduction, because I told you about my motivation for that. And that it's very important. What is your start point? When you open it, when your start point is money, then after 10 minutes you say, no, I don't do that. That's what I heard from my neighbors in the apartments. But from the 50, 7 persons on the moment, they are full electric. And on the moment, for the high price of gas, also in whole Europe, I think, they are very happy that they do that. That's my first point. Then what I do to bring it out, my ideas to the other ones. It's many times in the Dutch newspapers, and I have many contacts with other owners of apartments, and some, I think on the moment there are a few hundred, 400-500 people. They do it in the same way because it's so easy. It's not a question of uh, difficult things to do.
Okay, thanks a lot. And let's say in
Yeah.
this first phase where you
And
improve.
one important point. What I do was the combination with solar cells and windmill obligations. That's the point. I'm not only energy neutral with 30, I have 30 solar cells, not on my roof, but in the postcode rows. You know what it is? Else, you understand Dutch?
Yes, yes.
The postcode rows is that you put your cells on the roof of a big company and you can calculate it with your supplier. So I have 30, then I have 10 obligations in the windmills, and that total is that I am also financial neutral. I pay nothing.
Great. Great. Well, thanks a
So
lot,
that
Martin. Really,
combination, I think it's very unusual.
absolutely. No, thanks a lot. Inspiring story, both in terms of improving the energy consumption at home, but even then going one step further and investing into renewable energies, even outside your own apartment. So thanks a lot for sharing this inspiring story, Martin.
Can you
Then
understand
Isabel,
me?
perhaps
Because my English, I lost it the last year.
it's
No?
excellent. And we can't offer to now switch to Dutch, but your English is excellent. Isabel,
Okay.
perhaps then over to you in terms of how consumer organizations can help consumers in terms of providing advice, supporting through counseling. We had the complexity of information and the complexity of decisions in the last session. But let's say, what kind of role do you see for consumer counseling, consumer organizations? How can we help consumers in this complex situation of information overload, of all kind of different options that are, let's say, put to us?
Yes, thank you, Niels. Actually, indeed, it is quite interesting what Martin managed to do basically on his own, or starting on his own, because that is what we try to help consumers with, so that they don't stay alone and that they don't have to find out all those different things on their own. So the Federation of German Consumer Organizations, together with our regional members, with our associations throughout Germany, we started something that was supposed to be a project in the 1970s after the oil shocks, and it has lasted until today because it is so successful. So what all of us together provide is independent energy advice for private households. Independent in the sense that they're independent from companies, from suppliers, from any other providers, so that they can have a fair and independent assessment of the situation. This energy advice service runs 170,000 individual consultations and energy checks per year. So if you think about 365 days in a year, 170,000 per year is quite a lot. Over the course of the project, more than 3 million individual consultation sessions have taken place since the start of the project. And so next to the individual checks, there are also public information sessions. The impact of that project is really high, because the measures that are being recommended individually are very often implemented and lead to a measurable reduction in energy consumption and CO2 emission. So we really have those two links with the financial improvement and the improvement in terms of CO2 emissions. Overall, that means we have 900 advice centers throughout Germany and approximately 700 energy advisors. So the numbers are quite impressive. Okay, Germany is a big member state. And we have around about 400 projects of cooperation with municipalities, counties, or energy agencies. The number of staff within our organization is 42, because it requires quite some logistic, of course. The project aims to reach different target groups. So first and foremost, of course, private households, residential customers, if you want, energy customers. But there are three different categories of people that can get advice, and that will then differ. It's tenants, which is a very large part of the population in Germany. Then it's owners that live in their own residence, but also landlords, so that they rent out their property to tenants. And that can be either in apartments, single family houses, multi-apartment houses, housing cooperatives. That doesn't really matter. Everything's welcome. And also builders or prospective buyers can get advice. This service is free of charge for low-income groups, and for the other groups, it has a small fee, but it's really not prohibitive. There's online advice, there's phone advice, It addresses all the questions related to energy savings, including consumption reduction. So that is also one part that Martin explained in his own journey. Advice for buying electronic devices or replacing electronic appliances or heating system, and even advice for deep renovation. So it's quite comprehensive. And there are different packages, if you want, that you can access as a consumer, depending on your needs. So there's a very basic advice that is around an hour, and it takes place in the consumer's home. And there, the experts assess the electricity and heat consumption. They check the electronic devices in the household, and they then recommend on that comprehensive check simple energy saving solutions. So where is it very quick, that you can make small changes and it would already save energy and money. Then you have the full building check. That's around 2 hours. It's also, of course, in the consumers' homes. And there it's the assessment of electricity and heat consumption, again, electronic devices, but also checking the potential savings to small investments that are then a bit bigger, basically, than in the basic check. Check of the heating system, insulation, and checking the potential for the use of renewable energy. Then you can have a specific heating advice that just focuses on heating your home. It will assess the settings of your heating device and appliances and the overall efficiency of the heating system. So it's making improvements with what you have. You can have a solar heating check, so assessing the optimal settings if you already have a solar installation and the efficiency of a solar thermal installation. And then something that is definitely really important is advice on heating replacement. So then it's all about assessing the options for the replacement of an old heating system. What could be best for that consumer, for that household, from a technical, economic, and ecological point of view. So the idea behind that advice system is precisely to guide consumers. They don't have to read a lot about all the different options without knowing whether their home actually adapts and whether they can actually use those systems, but to really have a precise check and a sheet where they can then decide based on that to make some investments. For us, it's really important that we also have an economic incentive, so it needs to be cost neutral ideally, because saving CO2, of course, I understand, is the big importance of the moment, but not everybody can afford it. And the question is, how do you do that? What I found really important, maybe as a last sentence with what Martin was explaining, is that he said he was going full electric. And actually, yes, probably a couple of years ago, that was extremely pioneering. But we know these days that this is where we will have to go, going more electric and finding more efficient electrical solutions, which didn't exist a couple of years ago. And then also, I think the price drive at the moment in gas mainly, but not only with gas, will make it a bit easier to have that financial and economic incentive to do something about the energy efficiency, because it becomes more and more unsustainable also in a financial way to stay with non-renewable fuels. So that's it for the first intervention. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Isabelle. Very interesting, very powerful tool that you are describing. And probably indeed with the example of Martin, you now have a best practice which you can also put to the consumers you're advising. Perhaps two follow-up questions to you. First, I found it interesting that you also cover landowners, because we addressed this problem already in the first session, that where you're a tenant, the landowner often doesn't have the incentive to renovate. So do you see a lot of interest from owners that are renting their property to go for your advice and then improve the energy efficiency? First question. And second question, the advice that you're describing sounds so, let's say, useful. And you also said it's free of charge, at least for low-income consumers, that it sounds like something that every consumer in Germany should use. So you should have 80 million people interested. Well, okay, you take off families, so it should be down to, I don't know, 20 million. But let's say your numbers are high, but it's not 20 million. Why do you think that not every household is coming to you to ask for this kind of advice?
So the first question was about the owners. Yes, it's really, for us, it's really important that landlords also have access to that advice, because then they may also see in what ways they can make an investment that ultimately will not cost them more. So it's really important, particularly because it's a tenant market in Germany. So there are a lot of tenants, more than in other countries where there's a tendency to own your own home. This is really absolutely important, and also to see how they can make certain investments that is maybe demanded by a larger group of tenants, if it's a large apartment building, for instance. I cannot give you the statistics about the share of landlords and tenants that come to seek our advice, I have to admit. On the other hand, the success rate in terms of what is actually implemented, of what has been advised, is high. So that goes also for the landlords, and that's certainly a success. Your second question, why does not always come and see us? That would be great. But obviously, everything applies that we have discussed in the first session. So even if you're a homeowner, you have a lot of things on your mind. I also understood that Martin was starting his journey when he was already retired. So if people are still in the job and with families, and particularly at the moment with the COVID situation, I think everybody has a lot of on their plate already, and improving your home is not necessarily the first thing that you think about. We are trying really hard, and this is why we work also with municipalities and other actors and multipliers to make sure the service is known, because even though we are a very well-known organization and a very trusted organization, not every German consumer has ever set the foot into one of our advice centers. So ideally, we'd like to expand and increase the service. We see, however, one barrier coming closer is also a lack of skilled workers. So we need the experts to do the checks and to do the advice. So you need solid background with that. And we see that there is a lack of skills here also in terms of builders, and particularly in terms of deep renovation. And that may become a problem in the future.
Thanks a lot, Isabelle. Then let's move to Els. Martin explained that one element of his journey towards green consumption was using solar panels on his home, and then even investing on renewable energy sources beyond his own home. How do you see the use of solar panels? Testascha organized, let's say, a very successful auction of solar panels. How do you see this auction? Can you tell us about it?
Well, thank you. At Testascha, we engage in many energy activities, but I'm particularly happy to share with you the example of a very tangible one, which is the group purchase on solar panels. But before going a bit more into the details, let me maybe first take a step back and explain a little bit more about the philosophy behind it, what also triggered us as a consumer organization. You see, we know consumers want to contribute to the green transition, and that's very good because we need them to be on board. But actually they can do more than they think, because together they can also steer markets and become some kind of an accelerator. So this, therefore, our vision on consumers in the green energy transition is not merely a consumer-centered one, because we do need to make it work for all of them, but it's also a very much a consumer-empowering and consumer-driven one, giving them the tools to take the lead. Needless to say, this is quite ambitious, and this also leaves us as a consumer organization with a very large responsibility, with a huge task to take upon. We know consumers lack very often information, but even more the means and the tool to make the shift to more renewable energy. So it's a challenge for us to try and circumvent that. And what's more beautiful to use the power of consumers to actually try and do this. And this led us to develop group purchases for solar panels. We started with it in 2015, and basically we have never stopped since then. So how does it work? In a nutshell, we ask interested consumers to register with us. And to that regard, we organize information sessions all over the country, very often in collaboration also with local entities, so with cities and municipalities. And we take this bundle of consumer interest then to the market via a public tender. Basically, we go and offer a certain amount of potential new clients to all kinds of installers of solar panels, and we ask them for their best price. And the winner of this tender then gets to get in contact with the consumer, give a very specific quotation of how much it will cost for this specific consumer in this specific house, of course, based on the prices that we negotiated. And when the consumer agrees, well, then the solar panels gets installed. So it's basically about consumers teaming up, joining forces to get a better deal, to get a better price and a better service. And specifically, consumer organizations are very well placed to facilitate this because they have the expertise, they also have the trust of the consumers, and they have the critical mass to put pressure on market and prices. Since then, since 2015, since we started at Testachat, this group purchase became more and more institutionalized. And maybe let me explain this a little bit more. While in the beginning, we would ask first consumers to sign up with us and then take this to the market. Now, at the beginning of every year, we negotiate with all kinds of installers of solar panels to select the one that will be eligible to deliver this service to consumers all throughout the year. So instead of, an ad hoc action, it has become more and more a permanent action, a permanent service. Instead of consumers needing to sign up at a very specific moment, they can now sign up whenever they want throughout the year. And instead of using the power of consumers, we now also use the power of consumer organizations that represent millions of consumers, which makes it even more convenient and easy for participating consumers. And this brings me maybe to a final point I would like to highlight when we talk about solar panels and group purchases. If you ask me what makes them so attractive and appealing and also successful to consumers, well, basically because we take away all the main hurdles consumers are facing when they want to install solar panels. And let me maybe highlight the three main ones. The first one absolutely is price. It has been mentioned here many times before in the panel before us, but also yesterday. Financial impact is still one of the main barriers to install solar panels. Well, exactly by teaming up, by joining forces, we can get a better deal. We have been able to offer households in Belgium an average reduction of up to 1,200 euros. This makes a huge difference for consumers. Another one is, another hurdle that we are tackling is the lack of information and the lack of confidence. It has been raised here many times before. Consumers don't always trust or have doubts whether the solar panel is actually of a good quality or if the supplier is trustworthy. Well, if they join a group purchase, they don't need to worry about that because based on our expertise, we select the offer with the best quality. And again, by teaming up, we are able to negotiate also a better service. For example, a longer warranty. We have been able to offer warranties of up to 10 years for transformers, just to give an example. And maybe as a third and a final point, and I find this also a really important one, we release them of all the hassle that comes with, installing solar panels. They don't need to worry about anymore about what angle they need to cover. We take care of that, from negotiating the price to checking credentials, checking quality, to even, organizing some kind of a follow-up in case of technical problems afterwards. So we take this burden off their shoulders, and this makes it really convenient and easy for them. And by tackling all these practical hurdles, consumers have been able to do their bit, and it has left us with many happy consumers, because we know the satisfaction rate of the ones who participate in this group purchase is very high. But also more and more consumers have been able to install solar panels, those who wouldn't have considered that maybe before. And you could even speak also of a benefit for the society at large, because by promoting the use of solar panels, we also put pressure on the market and can reduce prices for everyone. So basically, it turned out to be a very much a win-win situation for many actors.
Thanks a lot, Els, for sharing this great example where a consumer organization with its expertise and its trust is moving in. And I think it's an exciting partial answer to the problems we were discussing in session 1 about the complexity of information. So where a consumer decides, I want to go for solar panels, she or he is then still facing the problem, okay, what kind of solar panel, what kind of permits, what kind of etc. So there are lots of consequential decisions which would have to be taken. And in this situation, the consumer just can trust on you, takes the decision, but then all the rest is done by you with the trust that you have, these price reductions, etc. Perhaps just one question in terms of outreach. Who can benefit and take part in your common actions? Is it just your members, or do you also open them to consumers who are not member of Testascha?
It's basically open for everyone. Everyone can join the group purchases. That's also why we go, for example, to town halls to have information sessions, and also collaborate with local entities, local municipalities. Now, in terms of price reduction, there's an additional benefit for our members, because on top of the reduction that we are able to bargain on the market, our members can get an additional reduction that is offered by us. But basically everyone can join, and that's also what we aim for, and that's also what our role is. You mentioned it is particularly complicated to know what to do and what solar panel to choose. Just to give you a very concrete example from Belgium, for those who know Belgium, we are a very small country, but we have 3 regions with 3 different kind of policies on solar panels, which makes it even complicated for us to organize these group purchases, because we need to take into account 3 different legislative frameworks. So imagine how it is for an individual consumer. Needless to say that we need to work on this, and to have a one-stop where they can get the right information, and consumer organizations are a very crucial partner to that regard, and we want to step in and facilitate this.
Great. Well, thanks a lot, Els. You mentioned town hall, so let's turn to our last panelist, to Elina, because obviously a very important partner in this energy transition is the local authority, is the city in which we are living. And Elina Lati is really an inspiring example of trying to be very green. So thanks for joining. And we are very excited to hear from you how Lati has been supporting their citizens in this effort to be green.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be here. As mentioned, we are currently the European Green Capital, and of course it's an award that was given us because of our consistent environmental work during the past decades. We are a city of 120,000 inhabitants in the southeast of Finland, and we are the smallest and the most northern and eastern city to win this award. And we have a very tough carbon neutrality target, as mentioned, 2025. So it's very soon, and we have a lot to do still. But we have made a big energy transition already when we gave up coal in district heating in 2019, and it's a big thing. It basically crashed our CO2 emissions. We live in a cold climate at the moment. It's a very beautiful winter day, but it's -15. So we need some heating anyway. Now we use biomass and energy waste in our heating, but as we've made the shift away from coal, oil heated private buildings, they are more visible in our emissions. And we have had a campaign for the private house owners in order to support their transition to more sustainable forms of heating. And we have been giving information, as Isabelle also mentioned, and sharing or helping them in order to find these national funding mechanisms and these kind of things in order to move to a more sustainable way of heating houses. And also we have made a guide for carbon neutral construction for family houses, like how to kind of from the starting point, how to make it energy efficient and climate neutral at the beginning. And also we have a climate smart housing cooperative project. So we share knowledge there as well in order how to run a housing cooperative very sustainably. And we also do a lot of different energy measures also in social housing. And I think it's important to not to kind of shift the blame or put pressure on the citizens alone, but we need to do the things we can as a city, but of course we need everyone aboard, but in a very nice, encouraging way. We want to make this transition together, and also not to forget the companies as well. And one last one I wanted to mention is a 1.5 degree lifestyle campaign that we are having at the moment. We have selected 4 citizens. 2 of them are locally famous and 2 just regular citizens. And we calculated the carbon footprint for them at the beginning. And then they played this 1.5 degree lifestyle game. They were able to choose from a different from different measures, like which would they prefer to do. For example, if they would like to maybe avoid some holiday flying, or if they wanted to buy more recycled clothes or other things, or if they wanted to lower their temperature in their homes, or these kind of things. And it was very nice to see that people chose very differently, but they all ended up in the same target. So the aim was to reduce their carbon footprint so that the lifestyle would be sustainable. And this is a way to show that you don't have to give up your private car. You can do something else instead. So it's a kind of positive way to encourage people through these stories, and maybe people can then think that that actually I could do the same as well. So these kind of examples from Lahti, we work a lot with citizen engagement and also these concrete measures that the city can do itself. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Nina. Indeed, inspiring measures that you are taking in Lahti. Colleagues, we will have a break at 10 to 12, so we have another 5 minutes left for let's say, a quick round of questions, comments from the participants. So if you have any questions, comments that you would like to make, please put your ideas, your comments into the Slido function. and then we will happy to, let's say, go into this. But let's say just to kick off, Martin, perhaps briefly over to you. Let's say when you're hearing the kind of support that VZBV in Germany was providing, the collective action by Test Achat in Belgium, and the kind of local support in Lati, would you have liked to use all those solutions for you in the Netherlands?
Yes, we have. I forgot to tell you. First of all, you asked me how many money I spent every year for this project. We reserved every year €1,000. And then with our extra money, we invested in solar cells and windmills. That's one of the points I must say to you. Then we have organizations in the Netherlands. They put solar cells on your roof, let's say 10, 12, what you want, and then you pay nothing in the start. What they do is look to your bill, and the difference between before and including cells, that different price you pay that organization. So that's a very nice financial solution for poor people. That's what I want to say. And then about a very strong point in my extra, my last page in my PowerPoint, I say something about heat pumps or hot pumps. Hot pumps is not possible in high-rising buildings because you have, in our case, 50 from 40 decibels. It's too lousy and it is expensive. You need a lot of maintenance. So hot pumps is for high-rising building, no option. So I want to say it to you. That are my points.
Great. Thanks a lot, Martins. And colleagues...
and look to the last page of my PowerPoint. Then I talk about the new idea of postcode. That's what you put your... we have 1,000 monuments in Middelburg. We have no place, and we cannot place solar cells on monuments. So you put it on a big roof of a company, and that we call that postcode roos. Yes.
Yes.
Look to my last page of my
yes.
PowerPoint.
I think it's a great idea. There are lots of good ideas where we can go even further. And colleagues, thanks also for your comments in the chat. One colleague was mentioning the problems to connect solar panels in Ireland, and then also the problem of the unit price being very low to give incentives. So it's an important point, which perhaps we can even also address in the third session. Then some were asking about information about the projects we mentioned today. So perhaps colleagues, what we could do, both Isabelle from VZBV, but also Els from Test Achat, and perhaps Elena also from Lati. If you have information about the things you're doing, send them to us and we will circulate them to all participants. One question was about the problem of getting the right information on the energy footprint of refrigerators in supermarkets. So that's the question of labels, which perhaps we can also briefly come back in the last session. Then Isabelle, somebody was asking whether it would be possible to share the story of Carl Green in Portugal. So if you give the intellectual property right to share that story in Portugal, that would be appreciated. Then one question about whether heat pumps should be promoted. Perhaps I reformulate the question whether the heat pumps are always the right solution. I think it's not a black and white situation. It depends a bit on the circumstances. For example, in Lati, we saw that you're more operating with district heating. So probably the kind of solution, let's say, depends also a bit on the context. And there the question of counseling, like from VZBV, comes in, because it may not always be the let's say, one single solution. Isabelle, I give the floor to you in a moment. And then one question was whether your services are available in all EU countries. And I think indeed the discussion at our panel showed there are great ideas, but what is important is first to make them even better known. Isabelle, that was your point. Else you bring your ideas to the town halls, which is good. But I think also to replicate this kind of support, those kind of solutions that we are providing, to roll them out in all EU member states, I think is critical. And in that perspective, I can offer, we have a group of consumer organizations in all member states that we are running at the union level. And in this group, perhaps we can bring your ideas that we have been discussing today, then to encourage consumer organizations in all EU member states to learn from that and share this information and bring it to the public. But before I conclude, Isabelle, briefly to you for the concluding remark.
As a concluding remark, I would like to point everyone to a study that was just published by our umbrella group BEUC on the question of heat pumps. It's an empirical study carried out in the field in Spain, in Italy, in Poland, and the Czech Republic. And it gives very granular information also on the circumstances when heat pumps can be used effectively, both for CO2 reduction and also in a cost-effective manner. So just for further reading and for further discussion on the next panel. Thank you.
Great. Colleagues, thanks a lot to the panelists for the rich ideas that you shared. I think great ideas that provide solutions to the questions we asked in the first session. Now we take another 5-minute technical break and coming back in 5 minutes for the third session, which will be chaired by Abella. So see you back in 5 minutes.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the last session. Before we get to the obligatory conclusions, it will be a short and a sharp session. I apologize for yet another set of technical difficulties which delayed the start of the session. And I have here with me 3 panelists who have been invited to help us answer a simple question, which is how to go about finding the most suitable offer on the market. So I'm a consumer, I would like to change supplier. In particular, I'm an energy consumer. So how do I find the most suitable offer on the energy market? And I have 3 speakers here with me for the next 30 minutes. First of them is Chiara Della Chiesa, who is the chair of the Our Electric Working Group, Customers and New Services. So she represents Our Electric, therefore the electricity sector. So Chiara, the floor is yours. Please tell us how to find the most suitable offer, how to go about it as a consumer.
As Euroelectric, we asked this question a couple of years ago, and I would like to mention that we have brought 90 different utilities that represent 200 million customers to sign a very important pledge to customer, which has the objective of empowering citizens to actively use the new services that apparently are already on the market. And after a year, so it was April in 2021, we gathered a number of surveys with the consumers, with 2,000 consumers across 10 countries. And we also surveyed different utilities to check whether we are going in the right directions. And the answers of the consumers were very interesting. 3 messages in particular. One is everybody realized that there are new services on the market, and I will talk about 2 in a minute specifically. Second is the consumers who are active in using them find them very, very interesting, and 80% find them very useful. The third problem is, the third message is a problem, which is a lot of consumers are not actively participating in the transition. So this is why this session to me is very important. I would like to speak about two specific services that I would like to mention. One is from NLX. It's called Omix. Omix is a smart home modular gateway connection, and through Omix you can actively manage the temperature of your home. It has an artificial intelligence that based on your routine, it makes the consumption of energy more efficient. It also has Alexa integrated, so it's very easy for all family members to talk to it. It also has an app, or you can also have these functionalities integrated in the modem of your internet provider. And all this was done in order to offer something easy, affordable, because it's very cheap, and also convenient for consumers to go towards the energy transition. The energy efficiency of each one's house is one of the most cost-effective action that we can do, not only to lower emissions, but also to improve our energy bills. Second service I would like to speak about is the super home, is the Electric Island Super Homes. This is a very cool name, but it's a service, a one-stop shop service created by a joint venture between Electric Ireland, which is the largest Irish supplier, and Tipperary Energy Agency, which is a local energy agency in Ireland that already launched this service in a specific region. Now they're scaling up with Electric Ireland. And the super homes means that you're having very nice without fossil fuels, energy efficient home, and the joint venture will help you towards the entire process. So consumers will have a hassle-free experience with someone that helps designing the project, identifying the intervention that they need to make, supporting with the application to the incentives that are available, finding the contractors, finding the retrofit expert. And the services that the retrofit means that you can have heat pump for heating your home, so in an electric solution. You can have PV on your rooftop. You can have insulation of your walls, high technology windows and doors. And all these can be done to offer the best energy efficient home to the consumers. And so the important message is that these two services are, of course, communicated through different channels. Of course, all the e-commerce, for instance, Omix is sold through Amazon, but it's also advertised through digital channels, through our own physical stores. But there is an important action that we need to make in terms of awareness to the final consumers that these services exist. Electric Ireland Super Homes, for instance, is advertising a TV series, you know, the ones where there are the architects that help families find their homes and retrofit them in a very cozy way. And this advertising has proven to be very successful until now. So the reason why in the Euroelectric survey we found that consumers are not actively participating is mainly due to the fact that they're not aware of the services that are there. So we need to work on that.
Well, thank you very much, Chiara. And it's also interesting to hear that the channels of informing about this type of offers does not always have to be the internet. And for example, the TV, which is accessible also to people who are not digital citizens, is an interesting way of advertising or informing people about options. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. So now I would move to Harry Mick, who is representing Spotty Energy, and will answer the same question: how consumers can find innovative, interesting offers. The floor is yours, Harry.
Thank you. I think I also have a presentation. If someone would show this, but I mean, to start with, I think essentially to tackle the question heads on. the customer always has a principal question about whether I should buy fixed priced energy, electricity or gas, or I should buy spot priced electricity or gas. I mean, spot priced means that you buy electricity or gas for the same price that is traded on the market. And fixed price means that someone gives you a guarantee that irrespective what energy costs on the market, I will guarantee you a certain price. And this is a fundamental choice. Now, a fixed price contract is on average always more expensive than a spot price contract. I mean, this may sound surprisingly in today's market situation, I mean, where we are experiencing, I mean, the wildest electricity and gas prices on the wholesale markets that we have seen over 20 years and since the start of the spot market in Europe. But it is so. And it's just mathematics on the end of the day, because if someone promises you a fixed priced energy, then part of the contract is always a risk premium. You always pay a premium for someone guaranteeing you a certain price, irrespective what the energy actually costs on the market. And this is why, on average, over a long-term period, a fixed price contract is always more expensive than buying spot over a long time period. Now, I'm not saying that you should never take a fixed price contract, but you should be, as a customer, aware, I mean, why you are doing this. Fixed price contract is a very good tool to prognose your energy costs. So if this is for you as a household vitally important to know how much you're going to pay for your energy that you're consuming, then you should go for a fixed price contract. If, let's say, monthly changes in your electricity or gas bill are not terribly important to you, you should go for the spot price. The spot price or the spot price contract is there to save you the cost. The fixed price contract is there to forecast your cost. I mean, this is the fundamental choice. Now, how do you compare? I mean, there are two questions. I mean, how do you compare spot price contracts between various suppliers that are offering this? And then, I mean, this is rather simple because, I mean, the spot price is the same for everyone. It's a traded price. For electricity, the electricity has a different price in every hour of the day. For gas, it's usually the day price. Could you go back on the previous slide, please? Now, so what do you actually compare is, I mean, how much does the supplier want for the service of providing you with a spot price? So usually every supplier, I mean, takes some sort of fee, I mean, whether it's a monthly fee or some sort of a margin or a combination of those both. So if you compare spot priced offers among themselves, you should only compare how much does the supplier want for providing you the spot price energy. Next slide, please. Now, I mean, what people often, I mean, want to do or tend to do is, I mean, they try to compare, I mean, the fixed price contract with a spot price contract, and this brings me back, I mean, to the first point. I mean, you should always compare comparable periods, because you don't know, I mean, what the spot market price is going to be in the future over a longer period. You can only compare what has been. So you can compare historical prices. You can take, let's say, the last 5 years. You can take the last quarter. You can take, I mean, the last year, whatever period, and take, okay, if I have bought fix or if I had bought spot, I mean, what would have been the difference? I mean, this is what you can do. But in essence, it doesn't say you anything exactly about the future. The only thing, I mean, you would know is over a long period of time. If I buy, let's say, over 10 years spot or over 10 years fix, I would be cheaper off with a spot, but I would have to live with the volatility of the market prices. I mean, that we are so strongly experiencing in this autumn. And maybe I mean one remark also regarding the comparison sites. I mean, those are very helpful tools. I think, I mean, if you're choosing between various spot price contracts or various fixed price contracts, I mean, you should always use comparison tools. But I would very much recommend always to use your government-owned or public comparison site. That's for the one. And secondly, I would always distinguish, I mean, what I'm looking for, whether I'm comparing fixed price contracts among fixed price contracts, spot price contracts. I mean, that's important. I mean, various governments, I mean, handle this differently. I mean, there are governments, I mean, that actually don't compare spot price contracts at all, whilst there are governments that actually nudge, I mean, their people or their customers, I mean, towards spot price contracts, I mean, as the most beneficial ones. So that's just a final recommendation. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Harry. This was really great. I think this is what many people were looking for I mean, you know, this is the topic of the moment, of course, and so this was a absolutely perfect, clear, simple presentation, and I hope those of us who still managed to stay with us at this advanced time of the forum, I hope you all found it very useful. Just a little comment. Given that we are, of course, moving to a decentralized energy market, as we have more renewables and prices fluctuate and so on, if all consumers favor the predictability and the fixed price, we won't achieve having the consumer in the center. So I think we need to have, I mean, people are different, of course, but active and, you know, the consumer that helps the energy market to respond to price fluctuation and to demand, balance demand and supply. Such a consumer needs to have, you know, we need some consumers who go for dynamic price contracts, basically. But given that people are different, so it's very likely that some people will go for fixed price contracts, some people will go for dynamic price contracts. So in the end, everybody's happy, including the energy market and the renewable producers. Okay, thank you very much. So we move to our last speaker, who is Giuseppe Giannoni, who is joining us from the Italian consumer association called Altro Consumo. And he will talk about possibility of collective switching through online platforms. So Giuseppe,
thank you. Thank you for these opportunities. The collecting switching platform is a project that we launch in Italy, following even other experiences among the Europe, which is called Abbassa la Bolletta. We started in 2013 launching this initiative to help consumer on making a right, conscious and safe choice about energy and gas supplying. I have a short presentation to share the main elements of this kind of activity. Please go on the next slide. Why we invent and launch a collective purchase? Because this is we think that as a consumer organization, this is the right way to make consumers the real protagonist of energy market. We try to make an easy access to consumers through a digital platform and to ensure them a concrete saving and an innovative flow on the energy bill, and also to help environment through the possibility to have an energy supplying, an electricity supplying, which come from renewable sources. Please go on. Which are the main actors or stakeholders of Abbassa la Bolletta? For sure, all the Italian families which are interested on the saving on energy bill. We invite all the Italian energy suppliers on power and gas in the competition, and also it's important that consumer organization coordinates and builds trust on this kind of initiative to group a largest part of consumers. Please go on. Which are the main steps of this activity? First of all, we invite all the consumers of the Italian consumer to participate for free. This is important on this activity. So they can sign up, they can register for free on a dedicated digital platform, which is abbassalabolletta.it. Then, after creating the group, we invite all the energy suppliers in a competition, organizing an online auction and giving the access only to energy suppliers which can ensure some specific elements. First of all, financial stability. Second of all, for sure, general terms and condition as guarantee of transparency for the consumers. After defining the winners of this competition on electricity, on power, on gas, then we can create for consumers a dedicated reserved area on which they can check their yearly saving estimation in terms of power and gas consumption. Then they are free to decide to switch or not to the new providers in a few clicks, and even in this case only through a full digital flow. Please go on the last slide. So, as I told you, we start in 2013 with the first edition. Until now, we organize 6th edition of Abbassa la Bolletta, involving more or less 500,000 of participants, and confirming the 30% of switching on power or gas. The saving is very, very concrete and real, because the people who switch on the new supplier save more or less 250 euros on power and gas. And then we are preparing, due also to the instability of the markets and consumption increasing of these last months due to the COVID, the new edition on the beginning of 2022. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Giuseppe. Maybe a quick question. We haven't launched the Slido, or the Slido is there. So if any participants still would like to ask a question, please do so. In the meantime, maybe I would ask if you already have any data or any indications that, let's say, in the last 4 months, there has been higher interest in the type of services that you were presenting here due to high energy prices. Do you already register more interest in these services? Let's say comparison tools, collective switching, or this kind of innovative products? Maybe it's early to comment, but would any of you would like to comment on this question?
I can go if you want. Yes, the smart home, it's now live on the market for the last 2 years. We've seen a lot of answers from the market. It's maybe it's one of our most successful product for two reasons mainly. One, it's a very cheap, so it's the lowest cost smart home solution now on the market. And secondly, the fact that is Alexa built in, it's very accessible for everyone. So I think these are the two most interesting feature. Regarding the super homes, this is live since the last few months, so maybe it's too early to comment on it. But what they've seen is that when they go to public event, maybe with a physical presence, there is a queue of people wanting to know more about the retrofit solutions. Everyone is interested. I think consumers are scared of the difficulty of the process. So finding someone that solves all the issue, it's a very important I mean, solution to offer. Also because the super homes do not have their own brands, but they are agnostic to the different solutions already present in the market. And this is something that apparently consumers like to have, like an objective partner that helps you and that you can consult when you need to retrofit.
Thank you, Chiara. Anyone else would like to react to this question?
Oh, as I told you, please, Harry. Right.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
I think, I mean, that leads us back to the point of fixed versus spot price contracts a little bit, because I mean, what we are experiencing currently in the market in many countries, and most extreme in UK, although it's not a member of the EU anymore, is that many suppliers who have been offering very low priced fixed contracts, I mean, go out of business now. Because, I mean, they concluded fixed price contracts, but, I mean, didn't hedge. So, I mean, didn't actually, I mean, buy or pay the risk premium on the market and secure them on their side. So, and now they are not able, I mean, to keep the promise of a price guarantee. So naturally, I mean, this of course, I mean, leads to higher customer switching, and because I mean, the customers are forced, I mean, to find a new supplier. Just to note.
Yes. Giuseppe.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, for sure. We daily talk with the consumers. Consumers asking us the right way and more safe way to save money on the energy bill. So the interest is constant, especially in this kind of uncertain situation that we live on the energy market. So we try to organize collective switching. We try to give them the right solution as a mission of a consumer organization. So I can confirm that the interest is very, very high on this topic, especially because we in Italy we have less than 50% of families which still are on the regulated market. So they need the right solution to switch on the liberalized market.
But of course, no one is forced to stay on the regulated market. And if consumers learn that there are much more attractive offers outside of it, then this is great news. And we would hope to see such consumers actually switching. So that would do you have signs of consumers leaving the regulated market as well? Meaning you, for example, Giuseppe?
We as consumer organization, for sure, we are we support liberalized market as a big opportunity to save money. For sure, we have a very confused situation in Italy because we have some specific supplier which offer very good price, but with different clauses, so no transparent contracts. So we have to monitor and to check this kind of situation. And this is the only way to build trust on the energy market, on the liberalized market, and also on the collective switching campaign like Abbassa la Bolletta.
Very good. I was just informed we have 2 questions. We have 3 minutes left, so maybe we try to answer these questions. The first one goes back to Harry, and it's about, is there data showing the comparison between the fixed and variable contracts available? I think that you said it, but could you maybe repeat? How is it with comparing the fixed price and variable offers?
Yeah, there is. I mean, we have looked at this, but I mean that should be looked at every country separately, because also in the spot market there are different price areas. I mean, usually covering one member country. But yes, sure. I mean, that is actually evidence-based claim that I'm making, that the spot-priced contract is always cheaper than a fixed average fix.
Thank you. Yes. And then I have another question. This is more comment on unaffordable consumer prices in Greece. And the person is saying that we should change the price formation. But okay, that's not for a discussion here. Can I ask maybe to Chiara, do you have any information on availability, or how is it with price comparison tools in Greece? And how is it with availability of different types of offers in Greece? If you can comment.
Yes, what I can say is that usually the government, or there is a third party that compares all the different offerings. So maybe Altro Consumo already has it. I'm sure that in Italy and Spain this exists. But in any case, what I would like to say is that we are now entering this energy transition. So it's important that on top of saving some euros in your bill, how you can really make the change at the end of the year is increasing the self-consumption. So putting a photovoltaic on top of your roof, or if you cannot do it, entering the energy communities. Now the European Commission regulation is now active in most of the countries. It's a very effective way of saving money. The smart home solution, oppure retrofitting your house with the technology that now allows you to save money, is something that I would suggest all of you to look at.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you, Chiara. And last comment, which I will just read as a comment of one participant. Okay, that whether, of course, if people on fixed price contracts can also be active, and then this is conditional on having accurate and frequent billing. So not just dynamic prices, okay? And then there's a very quick question. Are we aware of similar initiatives like the Abbassa la Bolletta in Italy in other countries? We know there is, for example, online group, this kind of group offer online also in Belgium. But can you mention any other similar initiative in any other country?
There is
in Austria.
Yeah, that's right. In Austria, in UK some years ago, in Belgium, Consument and Bond in Netherlands organize very recurrent campaigns on this topic. France for sure, and some small experience also in Spain and Portugal in the previous years.
Well, thank you very much. We'll have to finish here. But I'll thank you so much, all three of you, for being with us and for informing us about all these very topical and very concrete suggestions, which actually could be inspiration for many consumers these days. Thank you again. And
Thank you.
thank you. And I will now be joined back by Niels so that we can conclude the forum together. Hello. No. So I would like to, maybe I'll start. I would like to thank everyone who has, in this online format, found the strength to spend 2 days with us. And I hope you found the forum useful, because that's the whole purpose of it, to connect, between different actors of the change, and to have open discussions on what needs to be done so that we can put, we can put this change in practice. Yeah. So I hope this was useful. And we will, of course, reflect, and we will, of course, hope to be back in physical format next year, and we will reflect on how we can make the forum even more engaging and even more relevant to the day-to-day life of all of us, citizens and consumers. As is the tradition for the forum, we always have a set of conclusions which are kind of endorsed by the forum and is the result of our discussions. So in consultation with the main speakers or for the 2 days, we have prepared a set of rather short conclusions, which we will now summarize to you briefly with Niels, hoping that this could reflect the 2 days. And then we will upload the conclusions on the website of the forum, as is the tradition. So if okay for you, Niels, we go through this quickly. We have heard that, we know that consumers have enormous potential to be the drivers of the just energy transition. But for the just, let's say, for the consumer-centric energy transition to work, consumers need to have access to affordable and sustainable energy. And we have concluded clearly yesterday that clean energy transition, which is not fair, cannot succeed. We have also concluded that policymakers and public authorities need to support consumers to help them invest in clean energy measures, in renewable energy, in electromobility, and to help them engage in the energy market. We have recognized that there is a crucial importance of education, access to simple and understandable information, the importance of one-stop shops with dedicated energy advisors who can act as facilitator, help citizens understand what is possible. And we need to remove financial barriers for consumers to have access to investments which can be costly upfront, either into new technologies or energy efficiency. Energy poor and vulnerable consumers should not only be protected from increased prices, but they also need to be supported to manage their energy use and through structured and permanent solutions. We need to activate them. We need to help become the actors of their own destiny and stop being vulnerable and energy poor. And we have been discussing yesterday how to do it. And we also felt that there was a recognition for the usefulness of the Social Climate Fund that the Commission proposed, and that there is a need for local authorities, social housing companies, energy communities, system operators, suppliers, and every citizen to take action on the ground. There was also support for the Commission's Fit for 55 package, which puts emphasis on protecting consumers in the district heating sector to facilitate private capital investments and promote the use of renewables, and that is also activating the consumers across all sectors of energy. So this would be from my side, and over to you, Niels.
Thanks a lot, Adela. Indeed, turning to today's discussion, 5 points that we would also like to flag in the conclusions. First, that we will need a package of legislative and non-legislative measures to accompany consumers in that green transition. Second point, regarding the obstacles they're facing, one is the complexity and even an overload of information and the lack of clear and understandable information on one side, and the costs are clearly a driving factor to which Adela has already referred. Third, digital tools are a very important element in finding solutions, both in terms of getting information, but also, let's say, supporting consumers in getting access to offers, support, etc. Fourth, it's very important to identify best practices and experiences, where we heard a couple of very promising tools, such as counseling for consumers, collective purchasing, such as of solar panels, but also local actions by cities such as Lati. And fifth and last, that the support to consumers is a collective effort that needs the input from all partners, from citizens, from youth, from social housing organizations, businesses, cities and villages, communities. So everybody needs to be in this support to consumers to make sure that this necessary way towards a green transition is successful at the end. So those are the conclusions that we would like to draw. We will not let now negotiate the precise wording, but that's the core of the conclusions that we will draw from yesterday's and today's discussion. And with that, on behalf of colleagues from DG ENER, of Adela, and also of colleagues from DG Justice, I would like to thank you all, colleagues, for taking part indeed yesterday and today. We found the discussion incredibly rich. We also have seen that this question of the consumers in the energy transition is very important, getting even increasing importance day by day due to the policy need for action, but also the cost pressure of the households. So it's a very important topic. Thanks for your engagement. Thanks for your ideas. We will do quite a lot of follow-up actions in terms of sharing best practices, trying to advance also with our legislative work. But we have learned a lot. We have taken a lot from these 2 days and are very much hoping that you also learned a lot, that you're taking something away. And then we are all looking forward very much to seeing you, hopefully physically, indeed, next year. But in any case, that we are going to stay in touch. So thanks a lot and have a good day, all of you.